Strategos Kaelin of the Glypton Enclave adjusted the crystalline focus of his observation lens, the multifaceted surface shimmering with refracted light from the command theater's hollow display. Below, on the simulated plains of Xylos, a drama of exquisite tactical precision was unfolding. Kaelin, whose species experienced existence as a series of intricate mathematical proofs, found a deep, almost spiritual satisfaction in a perfectly executed military maneuver. And what he was witnessing was perfection. The Cathar hunting pack, designated ambush element scythe, moved with a lethal grace that belied their formidable size. Each of the 6 warriors was a symphony of biological weaponry, chitinous plating that deflected all but the most dedicated energy blasts, serrated mandibles capable of shearing through light armor, and 4 powerful legs that carried them over the fungal terrain in near silence. They were the Alliance's premier shock troops, the scalpel used for the most delicate and brutal incisions. "Observe, Arbiter Vex," Kaelin pulsed, his native language of shaped light patterns translated into the Alliance's synthesized standard tongue by the implant behind his auditory sensor. "Note the dispersal. Hunt Leader Xyler has positioned his fire pairs with textbook geometry, interlocking fields of fire, complete coverage of the designated kill zone, and perfect exploitation of the terrain's natural camouflage." Him, Arbiter Vex, a Cathar himself but one seconded to the Alliance High Command, shifted his massive frame. His own mandibles clicked in quiet approval. "The Hunt Leader is one of our finest. He reads the land as if it were a scroll of his own ancestry. The prey will not know they are dead until their spirits have already departed." Prey was a human platoon, 32 soldiers of the species Homo sapiens, designated Patrol Unit 7. On the main hollow display, their tactical icons blinked with a steady, almost plodding rhythm. They were moving along a shallow ravine, a natural funnel that led directly into the heart of the Cathar's trap. Kaelin had analyzed the human patrol doctrine for 3 cycles. It was aggressive, adaptable, yet prone to a certain operational sloppiness. A reliance on individual initiative that, to a Glypton, looked like raw chaos. "Their sensor sweeps are intermittent," Kaelin observed, a flicker of cool disapproval in his light pulse. "Their formation is loose. The point element is nearly 60 meters ahead of the main body. Inefficient. They invite disaster." "Are a young species," Vex rumbled, the translator softening the guttural clicks of his native tongue. "Full of fire but lacking the eons of discipline that forge true warriors. They believe technology and aggression are substitutes for patience. Today, they will learn a fatal lesson in a safe environment." The ground, in the humid, sporthic air of Xylos, Hunt Leader Xyler tasted victory. The atmosphere was a rich tapestry of scents. The damp, earthy smell of the giant shelf fungi, the sweet decay of fallen spore sacs, and the subtle, metallic tang of his warriors' own pheromonal discipline. They were statues carved from shadow and malice. His left flank pair was nestled within a grove of pulsating, bioluminescent flora, their plasma carbines trained on the mouth of the ravine. His right flank pair was dug into the soft loam beneath the root system of a colossal fungus that resembled a petrified tree. He and his second were positioned on the ravine's northern ridge, affording them a perfect vantage point from which to initiate the slaughter and command the field. The plan, provided by the Glypton strategists and refined by his own predatory instincts, was flawless. The humans would enter the 200-meter kill zone. His flankers would open fire, pinning them down. He and his second would then rain plasma from above, breaking their command structure and sowing chaos. Any who tried to retreat would run straight into the pre-sighted firing lanes of the rear guard pair. The entire engagement would last no more than 90 seconds. A clean, efficient harvest. He monitored the humans' approach through a multi-spectrum scope. Their forms were soft, unarmored by nature, reliant on the ceramic and polymer plates of their combat gear. They moved with a strange, bouncing gait, their spines held vertically, heads swiveling, so inefficient, so exposed. They were broadcasting their presence to any creature with eyes to see. He felt a familiar surge of predatory contempt. It was the same feeling he got when watching a lumbering herbivore wander, oblivious, into a canyon trap. This was not a battle. It was pest control. His mandibles parted slightly, ready to issue the silent, subvocal click that would signal the attack. The human point element, 2 soldiers, were now just 10 meters from the kill zone's invisible boundary line. Inside the helmet of Lieutenant Eva Rostova, the air tasted recycled and flat. Her HUD was a placid green, displaying biometric readings for her platoon, topographical data, and a steady feed from the patrol drone circling 2,000 meters above. Everything was nominal, all systems green. The exercise parameters were simple: patrol from Point Alpha to Point Bravo, engage any designated hostile forces. Standard procedure. Yet a cold knot was tightening in her stomach. It was a feeling she had learned to trust more than any sensor array. A primal alarm bell forged in the crucible of human evolution, a legacy of hominids huddled around fires, listening to the dark. "Hold up," she subvocalized, her voice a quiet command across the platoon's encrypted comms channel. The platoon halted instantly, melting into the cover that the ravine walls provided. 32 soldiers moving as one organism, suddenly vanishing from open view. "Sir?" Sergeant Marcus Thorne's voice, a low baritone that always sounded calm, crackled in her ear. "Thorne to Rostova. We reading something?" "Negative, Marcus," she replied, her eyes scanning the terrain ahead. She wasn't looking at it, she was feeling it. "HUD is clear, drone sees nothing. But the pattern is wrong." She took a knee, her rifle resting lightly in her hands. She expanded her helmet's audio sensors, filtering for ambient noise. That was the first thing. The chittering of the small, 6-legged arthropods that swarmed all over Xylos's fungal forest had ceased. The gentle, rhythmic pulsing of the luminaria fungi ahead seemed muted. The air itself felt heavy, still, like a held breath. On Earth, a forest that went silent was a forest that was being hunted. A predator was near. The birds stopped singing. The insects went quiet. Every prey animal froze, hoping the danger would pass them by. Rostova had no idea if the same rules applied to this alien ecosystem, but her instincts, honed by a million years of survival on a planet teeming with things that wanted to eat her ancestors, screamed that they did. "The pattern smells wrong," she said, more to herself than to Thorne. It was the only way she could describe it. The universe had a background rhythm, a hum of normal activity. Right now, ahead of them, that rhythm was gone. There was only a profound and unnatural silence. "Copy that, LT," Thorne said without a moment's hesitation. He had served with Rostova for 2 years. He had learned that when she got one of her feelings, it was wise to treat it as hard intelligence. "What's the play?" Rostova's mind was already working, not in the linear, logical way of a Glypton, but in a fluid, associative storm of possibilities. The trap would be in the open ground ahead. The ravine was the funnel. Therefore, the ambushers would be on the high ground and the flanks. They would expect the platoon to bunch up in the center when the firing started. "We're not going in," she said, her voice firm. "We're going to turn their trap inside out. Thorne, take fire team Alpha. Skirt wide to the west, use that cluster of spore sacks for cover. I want you on that ridge in 5 minutes. Find a firing position overlooking the ravine from the north. High-angle support, you're with me. We're setting up the multi-cannon right here, sighted on the northern ridge opposite. Bravo and Charlie teams, fall back 100 meters to rally Point Sierra. Set a defensive perimeter and be ready to provide covering fire for our withdrawal." Orders were a cascade of quiet, urgent whispers over the comm. There was no panic, only focused, deadly intent. "Sir," came the voice of Corporal Jian Lee, her demolitions expert. "I've got 2 seismic resonance charges, standard issue for geological survey, but I can repurpose the detonation sequence." "Do it," Rostova ordered. "Place them 50 meters ahead at the mouth of the ravine. Wide dispersal pattern. We're not trying to kill them, just flush them out. Put the fear of God in them." "Fear of who, ma'am?" Lee asked with a hint of humor. "They'll figure it out," Rostova replied grimly. In the command theater, Kalen's crystalline form went rigid. On the holo display, the human icons had stopped. Then, they began to move with a purpose that was terrifyingly different from their previous plotting. 2 icons detached, skirting the kill zone entirely, moving towards the high ground. 2 full fire teams were retreating, establishing a new perimeter far behind their current position. The 2 icons designated as the command element were digging in. A heavy weapon symbol blinked into existence, aimed directly at Xyler's concealed position. "What are they doing?" Vex growled, his body tensing. "They haven't detected us. Our camouflage is perfect. No sensor pings have been returned. They cannot know." Yet, Kalen pulsed, his own logic centers beginning to strain against the impossible reality unfolding before him. "They do." Hunt leader Xyler felt a flicker of annoyance. The prey had stopped. Why, were they spooked? A random sensor ghost? It didn't matter, they were still vulnerable. He would simply adjust the plan. If they would not enter the trap, he would bring the trap to them. He prepared to give the signal for a bounding advance, a more aggressive but equally effective maneuver. He raised his head slightly, peering through his scope to get a better angle on the stalled human column. His multi-lidded eyes widened. He scanned left, then right. His flankers were still perfectly hidden. But the humans, they weren't just stalled. They were gone. The ravine was empty, a cold dread, an emotion he had not felt since he was a pup on the Cathar homeworld began to seep into his mind. Where were they? Then his audio sensors picked up a faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of a heavy weapon's stabilization anchors being driven into the earth. The sound was coming from directly in front of him, from the human's last known position, and then he saw it. A flicker of movement on the western ridge opposite his own, not a human soldier but the glint of a rifle scope. He swiveled his head, his advanced optics zooming in. A human soldier was prone, weapon aimed not into the ravine but directly at him. Another was setting up a sniper position not 20 meters away. His northern flank. His blood ran cold. Before he could process this, a new icon flashed on his own limited HUD. A warning from his right flank pair. They were being painted by a target designator. They hadn't seen the source, but the lock was solid. His perfect trap, his beautiful, elegant, geometric kill box had become his coffin. His team was now pinned from 3 directions. The main human force had vanished, likely into a prepared overwatch position. And the targets he had been assigned to ambush were now aiming a heavy multi-cannon directly at his command post. They had not sprung the trap. They had not fled. They had laid a better one. A deafening roar ripped through the air as 2 seismic charges detonated at the mouth of the ravine. The ground bucked, throwing up plumes of dirt and shredded fungus. It wasn't a killing blast, but it was a statement. A thunderous announcement. "We know you are here." Xyler remained frozen, his mind a maelstrom of confusion. He hadn't given the order to fire. Not a single shot had been discharged by his team. The exercise rules were clear. The engagement begins when the first shot is fired. But the humans had repositioned, redeployed, and completely neutralized his ambush without a single exchange of energy. They had won the fight before it had even begun, his comm chimed. It was the exercise controller. "Element Scythe, stand down, acknowledge. Your position has been compromised and neutralized. The engagement is over." Xyler's mandibles trembled as he keyed his comm. "Acknowledged," he rasped, the word tasting like ash. He was a hunt leader of the Cathar, he was a predator. But in that moment, staring at the unseen muzzles now aimed at his heart, he felt, for the first time in his life, like prey. In the command theater, the silence was absolute. Arbiter Vex stared at the hollow display, his massive form slumped. He looked as if someone had carved the pride from his very bones. Kalen was cycling through data feeds at a rate that would have given a human a seizure. He replayed every second of the human platoon's comms, every biometric reading, every sensor log from their equipment. There was nothing. No data, no intercept, no thermal spike or motion sensor tripwire. There was no logical, quantifiable reason for what had just happened. The humans had reacted to a threat that, according to every instrument in the Alliance's arsenal, did not yet exist. He focused on a single audio file, isolating it. The human commander's voice. He played it again and again. "The pattern is wrong. Pattern smells wrong." What did it mean? A Glypton did not smell a pattern. A pattern was a mathematical constant, a series of data points that could be analyzed for deviation. It was not a scent. It was not a feeling. It was an equation, and this equation had a variable he could not account for. A variable that had just allowed 32 soft-bodied mammals to dismantle a trap set by 6 of the galaxy's most feared ambush predators without breaking a sweat. "This is impossible," Vex finally managed. his voice a low growl of disbelief. They cheated. They must have had an unauthorized sensor, a spy drone. Arbiter, Kalen pulsed, his light soft but firm. I have reviewed every byte of data. Their equipment is standard issue. Their drone remained at its designated altitude and saw nothing of your warriors. There was no cheating. Kalen turned his crystalline form to face the Cathar. We must accept the facts. They knew. The question we must now answer is, how? The debriefing room was a sterile white void, a virtual space where participants from across the system could meet without the inconvenience of travel. Lieutenant Eva Rostova stood at a virtual parade rest, her avatar a perfect, regulation-adherent replica of herself. Opposite her floated the shimmering, crystalline form of Strategos Kalen and the hulking, armored avatar of Arbiter Vex. Lieutenant Rostova, Kalen's synthesized voice began, devoid of inflection but heavy with intensity. We have reviewed the data from your patrol on Xylos. We have found no anomalies in your sensor logs that would justify your decision to halt your advance and redeploy your platoon. Can you please illuminate the specific data point that triggered your tactical alert? Eva felt a familiar frustration. It was the same one she felt during after-action reviews with her own human superiors. They wanted numbers, charts, verifiable proof. She had none. With all due respect, there was no single data point, she said, choosing her words carefully. It was an aggregation of subliminal inputs. The environmental conditions were inconsistent with established baseline norms for that sector at that time. Vex's avatar shifted, a visual representation of his impatience. Inconsistent how? Your environmental sensors registered no deviations. The sensors, Arbiter, Eva replied, trying to find an analogy they would understand. The environment itself, the local fauna, it was silent. The air was still. The shadows under the fungal growths felt deliberate, too perfect. There was a lack of randomness. It was a void where there should have been noise. Kalen's form seemed to pulse with a faster, more curious light. You are describing an absence of data as a data point in itself. Yes, Eva said, relieved that one of them seemed to grasp the concept. On my homeworld, ecosystems have a certain ambient energy, a background noise of life. When that noise disappears, it means a predator is nearby. Everything goes still, trying not to be noticed. I sensed that same stillness. The pattern of the forest was wrong. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It felt wrong, Vex repeated, the translator lacing the word with profound skepticism. You risked your command, you abandoned the mission parameters based on a feeling. My mission is to keep my soldiers alive, Arbiter, Rostova countered, her voice hardening, and to effectively engage and neutralize hostile forces. I did both. My feeling, as you call it, was the product of millions of years of evolutionary pressure. My ancestors didn't survive by waiting for the tiger to pounce before they decided it was a threat. They survived by noticing the birds had stopped singing and the monkeys had gone quiet in the trees. They recognized the signs of the hunt before it began. What I did wasn't a guess. It was an instinct. She paused, then delivered the line she had been preparing, the one she always had to use. The pattern smelled wrong, strategos, that's the best way I can describe it. Was a long silence in the virtual room. Vex was clearly unconvinced, seeing only a dereliction of logical duty. But Kalen was still, his light patterns swirling in complex meditative whorls. He was processing. Thank you, Lieutenant, Kalen pulsed finally. That will be all. Eva's avatar faded, and she was back in the humming confines of her ready room aboard the transport ship Endeavor. She let out a long breath and slumped into her chair, pulling off the neural interface headband. The pattern smelled wrong. Sergeant Thorne was leaning against the doorway, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. You really told a billion-year-old crystal brain that? It's the truth, Eva said, rubbing her temples. They want a number, a reading. I gave them what I had. Gave them the right answer, Thorne said, handing her the mug. You got us out of there without a scratch. To hell with what the walking calculators and the giant murder bugs think. The platoon knows. You kept them safe. Eva took a sip of the coffee, its warmth a welcome anchor to reality. I just wish I could explain it better, Marcus. I feel like a fraud sometimes, like I'm just getting lucky. It ain't luck, LT, Thorne said, his voice serious. My grandfather was a hunter back on Earth, old school in the Rockies. He taught me something. He said you don't hunt the deer, you hunt the shape of the deer in the forest. You look for the thing that doesn't belong. You told them the birds stopped singing, that's all it is. You just got a bigger forest to listen to. Eva managed a small smile. Thanks, Marcus. He just nodded. Anytime, LT. Now you've got about 600 pages of after-action reports to justify that feeling to the bureaucracy. Better get started. Back in the command theater, Vex was pacing, his heavy footfalls silent on the deck but his anger palpable. Instinct, feeling, she speaks like a shaman, not a soldier. This is an absurdity. They were lucky. A random, inexplicable guess. No, Kalen pulsed, his form now glowing with a brilliant, focused intensity. He had dismissed Vex, his mind already spiraling down a rabbit hole of galactic proportions. He was projecting new information onto the main holo display. Not battle schematics, but biological and historical data. Ancient Earth. A chaotic, violent world teeming with life. Arbiter, your species, the Cathar, evolved as apex predators on a world with a clearly defined food chain. You were at the top, everything below you was prey. Your instincts are honed to hunt prey. Prey behaves in predictable ways. It grazes, it startles, it flees. Change the display. It now showed a pack of Terran wolves coordinating an attack on a large moose. The humans, Kalen continued, his voice resonating with dawning revelation, did not evolve as the sole apex predator. For millions of years they were both hunter and hunted. They competed. They competed with bears, with great cats, with wolves, with other hominids. They were, what they call in their own language, mesopredators. They existed in a state of constant, lethal competition with other intelligent hunters. He brought up another image. An anthropological simulation of early humans. They weren't cowering. They were actively driving a pride of saber-toothed cats away from a kill. They were using fire and noise and coordinated numbers. They were not behaving like prey. Their evolutionary strategy was not simply to hunt, Kalen explained, the light pulses coming faster now. It was to outhunt other hunters. To do that, you cannot simply react. You must anticipate. You must understand the habits and patterns of your competition on an intuitive level. You must, as the lieutenant said, know when the forest has gone silent. Vex had stopped pacing. He was watching the display, a flicker of understanding dawning in his predatory eyes. When Lieutenant Rostova entered that ravine, Kalen stated, her senses, both technological and biological, began absorbing millions of bits of data. The humidity, the spore count, the ambient noise, the barometric pressure, the light frequencies to her conscious mind, and to her sensors everything was nominal. But to her subconscious, the gestalt of all that data, the holistic pattern, was wrong. It was unnatural. It was the signature of a concealed predator. He pointed a beam of light at the tactical replay. Her reaction was not to flee. A prey animal flees. Her reaction was to assume the role of a competing predator. She didn't run from your trap. She immediately began to hunt your hunters. She flanked you. She suppressed you. She turned your own killing ground against you. She did this because her entire biological and cognitive lineage is built on a single, terrifying premise. Kalen paused, letting the weight of his conclusion settle in the vast, silent room. To a human, the presence of another predator is not a threat to be avoided. It is a competitor to be eliminated. Revelation struck Vex with the force of a plasma bolt. The human's actions suddenly snapped into horrifying focus. The calm, efficient redeployment. The repurposing of survey charges into weapons of terror. The immediate seizure of dominant firing positions. It wasn't luck. It wasn't cheating. It was instinct. The instinct of a rival. We were not hunting herbivores, Vex whispered, the realization chilling him to his very core. We set a trap for a deer and found ourselves caught in the jaws of a wolf pack that had been stalking us the entire time. Kalen's form glowed a somber, deep blue. The analogy is more accurate than you know, Arbiter, but it is also insufficient. A wolf pack is a known quantity. We are dealing with something far more complex. We have based our entire interspecies military doctrine on the logical principles of strategy and tactics, of force application and asset denial. We treat warfare as an extension of mathematics, but the humans, they treat it as an extension of biology. We have been trying to solve an equation. They have been hunting. He turned off the holo display, plunging the theater into the soft, ambient light of its control panels. I must draft a new report for the Alliance High Command, Kalen pulsed. A complete strategic reevaluation of Homo sapiens. Our current classification for them is inadequate. They are not simply emergent bipedal mammals. They are not simply allies. Kalen focused his main lens on Vex, who stood as still as a stone effigy. We have welcomed a species of apex competitive predators into our fold, Kalen stated. And we have, until this moment, been utterly oblivious to the true nature of their genius, and the depth of the danger they represent if they ever perceive us not as allies, but as competition. Hunt leader Xyler sat in the sterile confines of the Cathar barracks, his plasma carbine disassembled on the table before him. He cleaned each component with a methodical precision that did nothing to calm the chaotic turmoil in his mind. His packmates were silent, each lost in their own private humiliation. They had not been defeated. To be defeated, one must first fight. They had been dismantled, outthought, rendered irrelevant before the battle had even been joined. He replayed the moment again and again. The silence, the unnatural stillness that he, a master of the hunt, had dismissed as inconsequential. The human lieutenant had called it a wrong pattern. Xyler was beginning to understand. He had been looking for the enemy. The human had been listening for the absence of friends. She had analyzed the entire ecosystem as a single entity, and when a piece went missing, the chittering insects, the rustle of small creatures, she had identified the cause. A junior warrior, Crack, finally broke the silence, his mandibles clicking nervously. Hunt leader, what they did, it is not logical. How can you fight an enemy that knows your mind? Xyler paused in his work, holding the firing chamber of his carbine up to the light. We have been fools, he said, his voice a low rasp. We saw them as soft prey protected by metal shells. We saw their vertical posture as a weakness, their chaotic movements as indiscipline. He placed the component back on the table. We were wrong. Their posture gives them a commanding view of their surroundings. Their chaotic patrols are not random. They are unpredictable, making it difficult to set a perfect ambush. And their minds do not work like ours. A Glypton thinks. A Cathar hunts. A human senses the hunt itself. They are creatures born of paranoia and vigilance. He looked at the members of his shamed pack. We were taught that the perfect ambush is one of silence and surprise. We have now learned that for this enemy, our silence is the warning. Our perfect camouflage creates a hole in their perception of reality, a void. And they do not fear the void. They attack it. A new and terrifying respect was dawning in Xyler. The shame was still there, a burning coal in his gut, but it was now mingled with a warrior's intense curiosity. How do you deceive a creature that reads deception in your absence? How do you surprise an enemy whose primary defense is to preemptively assume it is being surprised? You couldn't use logic. You couldn't use doctrine. The only way, he mused, would be to become more chaotic than they were. But chaos was the antithesis of a Cathar hunt. It was madness. The door to the barracks hissed open. It was a Cathar officer from the command liaison, his posture rigid. Hunt leader Xyler, you and your pack are to report for redeployment. New orders from Alliance High Command effective immediately. Rose, his pack scrambling to their feet behind him. Our designation. You are now classified as Specialist Opposition Force Designation Stalker, the officer replied. Your new training objective is to develop and implement counter-tactics against human intuitive threat analysis. You are to work directly with strategos Kalen. Your mission is no longer to ambush the humans. Your mission is to learn how to survive them. For the first time since the failed exercise, Xyler felt a flicker of his old fire. This was not a punishment. It was a challenge. A hunt of a kind he had never imagined. A week later, Strategos Kalen stood before a virtual assembly of the Galactic Alliance Council. Representatives from a dozen species floated in their designated pods, the insectoid Chithic, the gaseous Xenoth, the stoic, rock-like beings of Cygnus X1, and of course, Arbiter Vex, who watched Kalen with an expression of grim vindication. Kalen's report was not presented with his usual calm, mathematical detachment. His light pulses were urgent, colored with hues of caution and awe that the translators rendered as a deeply serious tone. For generations, Kalen began, this alliance has predicated its strength on a diversity of strategic thought. The logic of the Glypton, the ferocity of the Cathar, the industrial might of the Signans. We believed we had a complete tactical portfolio. We were mistaken. He projected the image of Lieutenant Rostova into the center of the chamber. This is a junior officer of the human species. On a routine training exercise, her unit was faced with a tactically perfect ambush. An ambush she dismantled without a single shot being fired, based on a cognitive process she herself can only describe as a wrong feeling. A murmur went through the assembled counselors. The Chithic representative chittered, a sound of dismissal. Feelings are not a military asset, strategos, they are a liability. This is an anomaly, not a data pattern. On the contrary, Kalen countered, his light sharpening. It is the most significant data pattern we have ever encountered. I have since analyzed over 5,000 documented engagements involving human forces, from small unit actions to fleet maneuvers. The results are conclusive. In situations of ambiguous threat, where a logical or sensor-based analysis is inconclusive, human units demonstrate a rate of preemptive success that is over 700% higher than any other species in this alliance, including my own. He let that sink in. We believed human adaptability was reactive. They are attacked, they adapt their tactics, they overcome. This is false. Their most profound advantage is not reactive, it is preemptive. They possess a species-wide, instinctual ability to recognize the subtle, almost undetectable environmental and behavioral signatures of impending hostility. They can smell a trap before it is sprung, Arbiter Vex added, his deep voice silencing the chamber. He had become Kalen's unlikely and most fervent supporter. They sensed the hunter's presence. My finest warriors, who can stalk a beast for days without being seen or heard, were perceived by these humans because they were too quiet, too still. We were betrayed by our own perfection. Philosophical implications began to dawn on the assembled minds. The Xenoth delegate, a swirling cloud of intelligent gas contained within a force field, vibrated. The strategic ramifications are profound. How does one formulate a plan against an opponent who can intuit the plan's existence? Any preparation, any coordinated maneuver by its very nature creates a pattern. If they can sense these patterns, how can they ever be truly surprised? That is the question we must now ask ourselves, Kalen said. And it leads to a more troubling one. We have integrated humans into our command structure. We have given them access to our strategies, our doctrines, our most sensitive intelligence. We did so under the assumption that they were reliable, if somewhat chaotic, partners. He looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of each delegate. But we must now consider the core of their being. Their evolution has forged them into the ultimate competitive survivors. Their instincts are not geared towards peaceful coexistence. They are geared towards identifying and neutralizing competitors. Today, we are their allies. But what about tomorrow? What if one day they perceive the alliance's strategic posture not as protective, but as restrictive? What if our attempts to control or direct them create a pattern that their instincts interpret as hostile? A cold silence filled the council. The open-ended question hung in the air like a death sentence. They had invited a creature into their home whose very nature was to be suspicious of any locked door. They had forged an alliance with a species whose greatest talent was preparing for a betrayal it could not prove, but could only feel. "What are you recommending, strategos?" the Signan representative finally asked, its voice like stones grinding together. "Fundamental reclassification," Kalen stated. "Humanity is no longer to be considered merely a Tier 2 alliance member. They are to be designated a keystone species. Their unique cognitive abilities are now the single greatest strategic asset in this alliance. We must learn from them. We must integrate their intuitive methods with our logical ones. We must create hybrid doctrines that pair Cathar hunters with human listeners, Glypton strategists with human seers. But," he added, his light dimming to a deep, cautionary violet, "we must also implement Protocol Umbra. We must create contingency plans. We must study them, understand them, not just as allies, but as we would study a beautiful and deadly predator we have allowed to sleep by our fire. We must hope they never wake up and decide we are the more immediate threat." Back on the Endeavor, Eva Rostova was finally signing off on her after-action report. She had done her best, filling the pages with dry, technical language about ambient acoustical lulls and anomalous lack of micromotion in the local flora. It sounded flimsy and ridiculous, even to her. She closed the file and leaned back, exhausted. The future of interspecies military doctrine was being rewritten light years away because of her. Treatises on the philosophical nature of predatory consciousness were being drafted by beings who saw the universe as an equation. Entire species were re-evaluating their place in the cosmos. Eva Rostova knew none of this. She was just a lieutenant who had listened to her gut. She got up and walked to the small porthole in her quarters, looking out at the endless river of stars. They were beautiful, but the starfield was also dark and profoundly silent. It made her wonder what other hunters were out there, hiding in the quiet places. It was a big forest, after all, and she had a feeling they weren't the only ones listening. The pattern of the galaxy itself felt like it was holding its breath, and she wasn't sure why. Not yet.